It wasn't exactly a dream job, but it was a job. And after months of unemployment and watching bills pile up, I wasn't in a position to be picky. The ad was simple enough. Help wanted at Paragon Carnival. All positions available. Competitive pay, no experience necessary. The carnival had set up on the outskirts of town, on an old patch of land that had been abandoned for years. I had heard whispers about Paragon Carnival over the years, mostly from the older folks around town. They'd talk about it in hushed tones, like it was something out of a forgotten nightmare. That carnival's got a history, they'd say. Been around for decades, but it's not like it used to be. Weird things happen there, strange accidents, missing people. Naturally, I thought it was all just small-town superstition. A carnival's a carnival, right? Kids laugh, there are rides, games, cotton candy, and a few creepy clowns. What could be so bad about that? But when the ad came up, and when the pay seemed to promise more than anything else I'd seen in a while, I figured why not. I needed the money, and it would only be for a few months, just a summer gig. The moment I arrived at Paragon Carnival, I knew something was off. The place was huge, much bigger than I expected for a traveling carnival. A sprawling collection of neon lights and rusted rides, the smell of popcorn and oil filling the air. The atmosphere was thick with nostalgia, but it wasn't a happy nostalgia. There was an eerie quality to the place, like it had been there far longer than it should have been. I met the carnival manager, a man named Gus, who had a permanent frown etched into his face and a stiff walk that made him seem like he was always on edge. He looked like he hadn't had a good night's sleep in years, his hair thinning and his hands shaking slightly as he handed me a clipboard. "You'll be working the midway," Gus said, his voice gravelly. "Games, tickets, that sort of thing. Keep an eye on the clowns, they can be unpredictable. Just make sure the kids are happy and everything will be fine." I nodded, trying to mask my growing unease. I had heard the clowns mentioned in passing before, but Gus's warning made my skin crawl. Unpredictable was one way to put it, I guess. I had no idea how true his words would turn out to be. I was assigned a small booth near the front of the carnival, selling tickets and handing out flyers for the main attractions. It was a perfect spot to observe the people coming and going, to see the way the carnival seemed to take on a life of its own. The light from the neon signs painted everything in strange colors, distorting the faces of those who passed by. But it wasn't just the lights that felt off, it was the clowns. They were everywhere, not just in the circus tent or on the rides, but moving around the carnival, milling about in the background, always watching. They had an odd, unsettling presence about them. Their painted faces seemed too still, their eyes too blank, like they were frozen in time. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were observing me, waiting for something. The first time one of them approached my booth, I felt my pulse quicken. The clown was tall, with a wide grin painted across his face and a wild mop of red hair. His costume was frayed at the edges, the colors of his outfit fading like it had been washed too many times. He didn't say a word. Instead, he just stood there, staring at me with an unnerving intensity, his hands resting at his sides. I tried to smile and offer a greeting, but he didn't respond. His eyes never left mine. After what felt like an eternity, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing against the cracked pavement. I watched him disappear into the crowd, the same sinking feeling in my gut growing stronger. Something wasn't right about the way the clowns moved, or didn't move, for that matter. They weren't interacting with the crowd like you'd expect. They weren't performing, or making jokes, or trying to make anyone laugh. They were just there, watching. By the end of my shift, I couldn't stop thinking about them. The clowns, the way their eyes seemed to follow me, the way their painted faces looked too still, like they were waiting for something. I felt as though I'd stepped into a dream, one that wasn't entirely mine. I went back to my tiny rented room, the carnival lights shining in the distance like 1,000 tiny eyes watching me. And I couldn't help but wonder what exactly Gus had meant when he said the clowns were unpredictable. I had a feeling I was about to find out. The first night on the job felt like a strange dream, like I was in a place that wasn't quite real. The carnival seemed alive with energy, laughter, music, the call of vendors and performers, but it was all underlined by a sense of unease I couldn't shake. It was as if everything was too perfect, too cheerful. The bright lights from the rides cast long, jittery shadows, and the smell of cotton candy mixed with something else, something musty, old, like the carnival had been in the same spot for far too long. I was assigned to one of the midway booths where I'd be selling tickets for games, watching over the prize counters and keeping an eye on the children who came through. Nothing complicated, simple enough I could handle it. But from the moment I arrived at the booth, things felt off. The crowd was oddly sparse for a carnival night, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the people around me were too quiet. The children who came up to the booth didn't have the excited energy you usually see in places like this. They didn't laugh or run around, and the adults seemed too serious, too tense. It was as if the carnival's joy was being held back, restrained by some invisible force. As I worked, I couldn't help but notice the clowns again. They were everywhere. Some were wandering through the crowd, others stood by the game booths, watching with their blank painted faces. None of them interacted with the carnival goers. They simply moved with unsettling purpose, their eyes constantly scanning the crowd. I couldn't help but notice how their faces seemed frozen in that wide, unsettling grin, as if they were all trapped in some eternal, silent performance. They were like statues, only they weren't. At one point, a clown approached my booth. He was tall, with a gaudy blue and yellow costume, and his eyes were too wide. His grin stretched unnaturally across his face. He didn't speak. He didn't even gesture. He just stood there, staring at me with those empty, glassy eyes. His painted smile seemed to twitch, as if it were struggling to hold its shape. I smiled awkwardly, trying to stay calm. "Can I help you, sir?" I asked, hoping my voice didn't betray the unease I felt. He didn't answer. He didn't move. He just kept staring. And then, after what felt like an eternity, he turned away and walked off, vanishing into the crowd. But something about the way he moved stuck with me. It wasn't like he was just walking. It was more like he was gliding, like his feet barely touched the ground. The rest of the night passed in a blur of oddities. The carnival was bustling with people, but it felt muted, like the joy had been siphoned away. I watched as another clown came to my booth, this one with a wild red wig and oversized shoes. But instead of offering jokes or tricks, he simply stared at the balloons hanging above me. It was as if he couldn't see me. He didn't speak, didn't react to the crowd. He simply stood there, his eyes locked on those balloons. When a child came up to him for a balloon, he gave one without a word, before turning and walking away again. I tried to focus on my work, handing tickets to the families that passed by, but it was impossible to ignore the feeling that the clowns were watching me, following me. I could feel their eyes on me even when I wasn't looking, and the static in the air was so thick that I thought I might suffocate. It was as if the whole carnival had shifted, become something darker, twisted, suffused with a strange energy that had seeped into the very ground. Then it happened. A loud crack echoed through the air, cutting through the light chatter of the carnival. I turned, my heart in my throat, and saw one of the carnival rides, the Ferris wheel, jerk violently, its metal frame groaning in protest. The lights on it flickered erratically, casting shadows that danced across the darkened street. For a moment, everything stood still. The lights went out completely, and the carnival was plunged into darkness. I stood frozen in place, the silence overwhelming. It was like the entire world had stopped. My breath caught in my throat, and then the lights flickered back on. But they weren't the same. The Ferris wheel's lights blinked erratically, casting sharp, jagged shadows, and the sound of the carnival came back, harsher, deeper, and wrong. The laughter that had once filled the air was now twisted, hollow. It was as if the joy had been replaced with something far more sinister. I looked around in panic, but no one seemed to notice. The carnival goers were still moving, still laughing, still going about their business as if nothing had happened. But I could feel it in the pit of my stomach. Something was wrong. And that's when I heard it. A voice. It wasn't human. It was low, guttural, like a growl, and it came from behind me from the shadows. "Don't leave." I spun around, but there was no one there. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the carnival again. The clowns were still there, moving silently through the crowd, watching, but now their faces weren't just unsettling. They were waiting. Their eyes were locked on me. I was the target, the one they had been waiting for. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. The carnival wasn't just haunted by ghosts or spirits. It was alive. It was feeding off the fear, feeding off something darker that I had yet to understand. And those clowns, they weren't just creepy. They were agents, sentinels of whatever dark force had taken over this carnival, keeping me here, watching me, making sure I wouldn't escape. I had to get out. But the longer I stood there, the harder it became to move. I could feel the walls closing in, the carnival surrounding me, trapping me. The clowns were drawing closer, and I knew I had to face them, to face whatever it was that had taken root in this place. The moment I felt their eyes on me, the weight of the clown's presence grew unbearable. The noise of the carnival around me, the laughter, the music, the clinking of game prizes, suddenly felt distant, muffled, like I was trapped under a thick sheet of glass. Every movement I made felt unnatural, as if the air itself was resisting me. I could sense the clowns moving, their faces like frozen masks of exaggerated joy, but their eyes were different. They weren't happy. They weren't performing. I tried to calm myself, to remind myself that I was just being paranoid. The lights of the carnival flickered, momentarily dimming before returning to their usual bright flashes. The Ferris wheel loomed ominously in the distance, its movement now slow and jerky. It seemed wrong, like the carnival was alive, but not in the way it should be. I glanced over at the booths, at the workers, but there was no one else who seemed to notice the strange change in the atmosphere. And then, as if on cue, a clown approached my booth. His face was painted in exaggerated reds and blues, his large mouth stretched into an unnervingly wide grin. But there was something off about him. He didn't carry the usual air of cheerfulness or goofiness. His steps were slow, deliberate, and his eyes, those deep, vacant eyes, never left mine. It was like he was staring through me, as if I were the subject of some silent examination. "Good evening," he said, but his voice didn't match his appearance. It wasn't jolly or high-pitched. It was low, gravelly, almost a whisper. I forced a smile, trying to keep the tension out of my voice. "Hi there. What can I help you with?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he tilted his head, his painted grin never faltering. There was something unsettling about the way he watched me, as if he were considering something before he spoke again. "The carnival's quite lively tonight, isn't it?" His voice sent a shiver down my spine. "Yeah, it's busy," I replied, but my words felt hollow in the heavy silence between us. My gaze flicked toward the crowd, but the people seemed distant. It was as if I were looking through a fog at them. The carnival goers, laughing and chatting, seemed to be moving in slow motion. I couldn't help but wonder if they were aware of the same things I was feeling, or if they were all part of whatever was happening here. The clown leaned forward slightly, his face now just inches from mine, and I caught a glimpse of something behind the painted smile. His lips quivered with a subtle twitch, like a smile forced on him by some unseen force. And then, without warning, he raised a finger to his lips and made a shh sound. The air grew colder, the carnival noises further away, almost silent now, as though he were creating some kind of bubble around us. I tried to laugh it off. "Is something funny?" But the clown didn't respond. He simply stared at me, his grin frozen, and for a moment, the carnival around us felt like a distant memory. I felt the pressure in my chest grow heavier, as though the clown's presence was sucking all the air from the room. Before I could say anything else, another clown appeared behind him, equally as disturbing. This one had an oversized red nose and exaggeratedly bright blue eyes, but his grin was wider, his teeth sharper. He too stood silently, watching me, but there was something unsettling about their stillness. They weren't here to entertain. They were here to watch, to wait. I stepped back, my pulse quickening. Is there something I can do for you guys?" The first clown's lips twitched again, and he slowly tilted his head, the way a predator studies its prey. "You've been a good addition to the carnival," he murmured, his voice lower now. "So much fun to be had here." I froze. Fun? There was nothing fun about the way he was speaking, about the coldness of his tone, the way the other clown stood behind him, unmoving, eyes locked onto me. Their smiles didn't seem joyous anymore. They seemed malignant, like they were masking something far darker beneath those painted faces. I'm just doing my job," I stammered, trying to steady my breathing. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my head felt foggy. I needed to get away from them, but I didn't know how. My legs felt like they were rooted to the spot. The second clown let out a low chuckle, a sound that echoed too loudly in the stillness of the booth. "Job," he repeated, as if the word was foreign, as if he couldn't quite grasp the concept. "But you are part of the carnival now, part of the family." I backed away slowly, my hand clutching the edge of the booth as I tried to retreat. The space between us felt suffocating. The lights flickered again, casting the clowns' faces in strange, shifting shadows. The first clown reached out, just barely grazing my arm with his gloved hand. The touch was cold, sending a shock through my body. "Everyone who comes here becomes part of the carnival," he said, his voice low and almost melodic. "You won't leave, not unless we let you." I pulled my arm back instinctively, stumbling as I moved away from the booth. But they didn't follow. The clowns just stood there, watching me, their eyes unblinking, their smiles as wide as ever. They hadn't moved an inch since they'd first appeared. And yet, the carnival around me had become distorted, unreal, The people who had been laughing, enjoying the games, seemed like mannequins, frozen in their joy, waiting for something. For me. The second clown gave me one last look, his eyes narrowing in a silent warning. "Come back soon," he said, but it wasn't an invitation, it was a promise. I didn't wait to hear more. I turned on my heel and bolted away from the booth, trying not to look back. The carnival lights flickered again, casting strange shadows across the midway. The air was thick with unease. The carnival no longer a place of fun, but something sinister, something alive. And as I ran through the crowd, I could still feel their eyes on me, the clowns, watching from the shadows. I had no idea what was happening, but I could feel it. The carnival, the clowns, they weren't just part of a show. They were part of something far darker, something that wasn't just waiting for me but hunting me. I couldn't shake the feeling of their eyes on me. The clowns were always there, lurking in the background of the carnival, watching, waiting, like predators stalking their prey. The feeling that something was terribly wrong with Paragon Carnival kept growing, gnawing at me. Each passing day, the atmosphere felt more oppressive, more alive with something darker. It was as if the carnival wasn't just a place. It was something else, something that had been waiting for me, and now that I had stumbled into its grip, it wasn't going to let me go. The next morning, I tried to clear my mind. I tried to convince myself I was just overreacting. The clowns were just performers, right? They had to be. But the memory of their cold, knowing stares haunted me. They weren't just part of the show, they were something other. And the carnival itself felt like it was feeding off my fear. I decided to do something about it. I needed answers. I couldn't keep ignoring the nagging feeling that there was something dark buried beneath the surface of this place. The old, hidden part of me that had always enjoyed a good mystery urged me to investigate. I started with the old records, the carnival's history. Surely there was something written down, some explanation for the strange energy in the air. I went into the manager's office, a small room behind the main ticket booth that I hadn't noticed before. It was dusty, with a large desk piled high with papers and files. The faint scent of stale coffee and old leather filled the air. As I sifted through the stacks of paperwork, I found something odd. A thick, leather-bound journal buried beneath some receipts. I opened it carefully, its pages yellowed and fragile. The handwriting was old, but still legible, and the first few pages chronicled mundane things: accounting, customer logs, details about the rides and performers. But then, the entries started to get darker. "There's something wrong with the clowns," one of the entries read. "They've been here longer than anyone remembers. Some say they come from the darkest corners of the carnival. They are not just performers. They are something much older. They are waiting for something, waiting for someone to open the gate." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The journal entries grew more frantic, the handwriting shaky. The gateway is closer now. I can feel it. The clowns aren't just here to entertain. They are here to guard it. The page was torn at the edges, as though someone had ripped it in a hurry. I flipped through more pages, desperate to learn more. The entries mentioned a man, the ringmaster, who had been with the carnival since its inception, and how he seemed to have some kind of power over the clowns. But the real terror came when I found a passage scrawled in dark ink. "The ringmaster knows. He is the key. The clowns are the gatekeepers. They've been waiting to find the one who can open the gate. And when they do, everything will change." The cold realization hit me like a ton of bricks. The carnival wasn't just a business. It was a trap. A place where something dark had taken root. something ancient and terrifying, and the clowns were the guardians of this malevolent force. My thoughts raced, and a single question kept echoing in my mind. Who was the ringmaster? What did he know? And why was I suddenly so drawn into this nightmare? I couldn't sit around waiting for answers anymore. I had to find him, the ringmaster. I had to confront whatever darkness had taken hold of this carnival before it consumed me too. I spent the next several hours searching for any clue that could lead me to the ringmaster. I ventured into areas of the carnival that I had never seen before, behind the rides, behind the tents, places where the performers stayed. The further I went, the more oppressive the air became, thick with the sense of something watching, something waiting. The shadows seemed to stretch and warp, like they were alive, twisting in ways that made no sense. Eventually, I found myself in a small, dimly lit tent at the back of the carnival grounds. The faded red and yellow fabric hung loosely from the poles, and the smell of old wood and incense filled the air. It felt like the very atmosphere had changed as soon as I stepped inside. There, in the center of the tent, stood a figure draped in black, a tall, imposing man with a wide-brimmed hat, his face obscured by shadows. The ringmaster. He didn't speak, but I felt his presence all around me. His eyes, though hidden in the darkness, seemed to pierce right through me. It was as if he could read my thoughts, my every fear. "You've come to understand, haven't you?" The voice was low and smooth, like the rustling of dry leaves. I took a step forward, my heart racing, but the ringmaster didn't move. He simply stood there, his presence so overwhelming that I could feel the ground beneath me tremble. "What is this place?" I demanded, my voice shaking despite my attempts to stay calm. The ringmaster tilted his head slightly, as if amused by my question. "This is more than just a carnival," he said. "It is a doorway, a portal to what lies beyond. The clowns are the keepers of the gate, waiting for the one who can open it. And now, you're here. You're the one." His words chilled me to the core. I had unwittingly walked into the heart of the carnival's dark secret. I had become part of it, a player in a twisted game that had been set in motion long before I'd arrived. The clowns, the twisted performances, the unshakable dread, it was all connected. It was all feeding something ancient, something beyond the carnival's facade. "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The ringmaster smiled, his lips curling into a sinister grin. "Now, the show begins." The words hung in the air like smoke, curling around my mind, suffocating me with their implication. The ringmaster's grin remained, his eyes never leaving mine as I tried to process what he had just said. The show? What show? I was no longer sure I wanted to be part of whatever twisted performance this carnival had in mind. But as he stood there, still and imposing, I felt an undeniable pull to him, as if my feet were moving of their own accord, drawn to him like a moth to a flame. My heart hammered in my chest, and a wave of cold dread washed over me. I tried to resist, to turn away, but it was as though the carnival itself was pulling me into its dark heart, unwilling to let me escape. "You are the one, aren't you?" The ringmaster's voice was softer now, but there was an edge to it, like he was savoring something. "The one who can open the gate." I shook my head, trying to clear the fog that seemed to settle over my thoughts. I didn't know what he was talking about, what gate he meant, but I could feel the walls of the carnival shifting around me, closing in. The atmosphere was thick with something unholy, a sense of impending doom that I couldn't shake. I don't understand," I stammered, stepping back, desperate to break free from the pull of his gaze. The ringmaster chuckled darkly, his voice echoing through the tent. "Of course you don't understand yet. That's part of the show." And then it hit me. This wasn't just about the clowns. This wasn't just about some carnival attraction. I had stumbled into something far darker, far more dangerous. The carnival itself was the gate, and the clowns. They were the guardians, the keepers of whatever lay on the other side. And now, I was in the center of it all. The floor beneath me rumbled, and the shadows in the corners of the tent seemed to grow, twisting like dark serpents, creeping toward me. The ringmaster's grin widened as he stepped closer, his silhouette blocking the dim light from above. It felt like the world around me was growing smaller, as if the walls of the tent were closing in, tightening around me. "You see," he continued, his voice now a low, almost hypnotic whisper, "the carnival has been waiting for you. It's been watching, sensing your fear, your curiosity. The shadows have been whispering to you, guiding you here." I felt a chill run down my spine as his words sank in. The carnival had been waiting for me? I had thought it was just the usual oddities of a strange, old carnival. Freak shows, eerie clowns, and sinister attractions. But now, I understood. This place wasn't just some odd collection of games and tents. It was alive. It had been waiting for me, and it was feeding on my fear. "The carnival doesn't just entertain," the ringmaster said, his voice dripping with malice. "It consumes. It eats fear. And now, it's time for you to give it what it wants." My pulse quickened, and the room seemed to tilt. I felt dizzy, like I was being pulled into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The tent around me warped and bent, the air growing heavier with each passing second. The shadows in the corners swirled, growing larger, reaching out with tendrils of darkness, like they were alive, hungry. The clowns began to appear from the darkness, each one stepping forward in time with the ringmaster's words. Their painted faces twisted into grotesque masks of joy, but their eyes, those eyes, were cold, empty, and full of hunger. They weren't just clowns. They were vessels, tools for whatever dark force the carnival served. They weren't here to entertain. They were here to feed. I tried to back away, but my feet felt glued to the ground as if the carnival itself had claimed me, unwilling to let me go. The ringmaster stepped forward, his presence overwhelming, his grin widening. "It's time," he whispered. I felt something shift inside me. My heart beat faster, my blood pounding in my ears, and then, with a sudden, terrifying clarity, I understood. I was the entertainment. I wasn't meant to leave. I wasn't meant to survive. The carnival had been waiting for someone like me, someone who would unknowingly feed it, fuel its hunger. A shadow moved behind me, and I spun around, heart racing. There, standing at the entrance to the tent, was the cat. The large, black feline that had watched me from the moment I'd first arrived at the carnival. But now, it was different. Its eyes glowed unnaturally, its body elongated, its fur rippling with a strange energy. The cat let out a low growl, its mouth opening wider than it should have, revealing sharp teeth that gleamed in the dim light. The shadows swirled around it, and for a moment I thought I saw other figures behind it, shapes too dark to fully comprehend. The ringmaster laughed softly, his voice carrying an eerie resonance. "The gate is open now," he said. "The carnival is feeding, and soon you will be one of us." The tent seemed to shrink around me, the walls collapsing inward. The cat moved forward, its eyes locked on mine, and I felt the ground beneath me tremble. The air grew colder, the lights flickering in and out, and the clowns closed in, their faces twisted into cruel, silent grins. I could feel the presence of the gate now, its pull, its hunger. The shadows behind the clowns reached out toward me, wrapping around me like cold hands, pulling me into their grasp. The air was thick with fear, and I realized too late that there was no escape. I was already part of the carnival. The cat lunged at me, its claws outstretched, and the darkness swallowed everything. Everything went dark. For a moment, I was suspended in a void, like I was drifting between two worlds. There was no sound, no movement, just an overwhelming sense of cold and emptiness. The oppressive weight of the carnival, the clowns, the shadows, the ringmaster, had consumed me. I was no longer in control. I was part of it now, trapped within the very fabric of this nightmarish place. But then, as if it had been waiting for me to succumb, a voice pierced through the darkness. "You are ours now." It was the ringmaster's voice, but it wasn't just his voice. It came from everywhere, reverberating in the space around me, inside me. The voice wrapped around my mind like a coil, squeezing the last remnants of hope from my chest. I tried to move, tried to scream, but my body wouldn't respond. I was frozen, paralyzed by the force of the carnival's will. And then I heard it again, the scraping sound, the same sound I had heard so many times before, from the deep, dark recesses of the carnival grounds. The walls were shifting again, bending, twisting like something living, stretching toward me. I felt it, a cold presence moving around me, brushing against my skin, making the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. It was no longer just the cat, no longer just the clowns. It was the carnival itself, the very thing I had been drawn into. The ground beneath me rumbled. The carnival was awakening, and I was the catalyst. The lights began to flicker erratically, casting long, jagged shadows that slithered across the ground. I looked up, and the cat was there, staring at me. Its eyes gleamed like twin orbs of darkness. But now, they seemed to pulse with a terrible energy that threatened to consume everything around me. I tried to focus, to think. I had to find a way out. There had to be something I could do. I was in the heart of the carnival now, the place where everything had been set into motion. The shadows had been watching me, guiding me, pulling me into this nightmare, and now I was part of the twisted show. But I could break free. I had to. I remembered the journal, the ringmaster's words, the gateway, the clowns, the darkness that had fed on fear, on souls for so long. I had to stop it. I had to close the gate. I reached deep within myself, trying to summon any ounce of strength I had left. My limbs felt heavy, my mind clouded, but I had to push through the terror that was suffocating me. The cat's glowing eyes seemed to pull at me, its gaze a physical weight, drawing me into its darkness. But I resisted. I pushed back, forcing my hand to move, my fingers trembling as I reached for the edge of my costume, a small metal pendant that hung loosely around my neck. The pendant had once been a simple trinket, just something I had picked up at a flea market when I had first joined the carnival. It hadn't meant anything to me at the time, but now, in the depths of this nightmare, it felt like something more. I clasped it tightly, feeling a surge of warmth run through me, like a small flame flickering against the coldness. It's not too late. The voice came again, louder this time, more insistent. But this time, I heard something different in it. I wasn't alone anymore. The shadows were closing in, but I wasn't helpless. I had the pendant, and with it, I had the power to fight back. I held it in my hand, and as I did, the carnival seemed to shudder. The lights flickered, then went out completely, leaving only the soft, eerie glow of the cat's eyes in the darkness. The shadows surrounding me writhed, their movements more frantic now, as if they were being driven back. I focused on the pendant, the warmth spreading through me, and I whispered words that I didn't even understand. Words I had somehow known, deep inside, as if they had been passed down through the carnival's cursed legacy. The world around me began to twist. The walls groaned, their surfaces cracking, splintering as if the very fabric of the carnival was breaking apart. The cat hissed loudly, but the sound was distant, muffled, as if its power was being drained away. The shadows that had once surrounded me were being pulled back, retreating into the corners of the carnival, their forms collapsing, dissolving into nothingness. And then there was silence. The carnival, the sounds, the lights, the shadows, was gone. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive weight that had been pressing on me for so long lifted. I could hear the soft rustling of the leaves in the breeze outside, the chirping of distant crickets. The dark presence that had suffocated the carnival seemed to have vanished. But I knew this wasn't just over. The battle wasn't won. The ringmaster's voice echoed once more, but this time it was different, weakened. You think you've won? The carnival will return, and you will return with it. I felt my heart race again. The ringmaster, the clowns, the dark energy, they were all part of it. But I had fought back, and in that moment I realized that I could. I could stop it. I could close the door that had been opened, sever the connection between the carnival and whatever lay beyond it. The dark force had been banished for now, but it wasn't gone. It was just waiting, like a patient predator biding its time. I took a deep breath and turned away, stepping toward the now empty carnival grounds. The lights had gone out. The rides stood still, their twisted frames silent. The shadows were gone. But I knew it wouldn't stay that way forever. I had stopped the show, for now, but one day it would come back, and so would I.